What up? I'm Swall Dog. I like to build cool stuff. Today, troubleshooting the heater on my 2001 Dodge 2500. So, let's check it out. What we've got going on here is the heater isn't working. It's just blowing not hot. So, I've already got the truck warmed up and I've done a little bit of troubleshooting as I've been driving the truck. So I'm going to show you what I did and see what we can't figure out. All right, so we're in the truck and I've got it warmed up. I'll turn the camera. What's happening is the heater's only blowing out about 70 degrees, even when the truck's warmed up to operating temperature, which when it's 20 degrees outside isn't hot enough to keep the cab real warm. So what I've been doing as I've been driving it is, first thing I checked was to make sure that the truck was getting up to operating temperature without any problem. It would get up to 190 degrees, no problem, and then it would stay there without any issues. So that automatically rules out any kind of an engine or cooling system issue with the thermostat or something. The next thing, checking to make sure that all the controls in the cab are working. So I'm going to kind of show you what I did to do that on this truck. You have your controls right here, and you want to check these with the truck running and with it up to operating temperature as you're driving it or whatever. I'm not going to do that right now because I've already done it, and with the truck running you probably wouldn't be able to hear me as well. So first thing you want to do is make sure that there's actually air blowing out. So this control right here is going to control the blower motor. So it's electronic, and you got your low and all the way up to high, and you just rotate through that and make sure that it's blowing, there's an adequate amount of air blowing out of the vents. The next thing you want to do is check to make sure on this control that it's changing between the vents. This control is actually vacuum actuated. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that this is working and that you don't have a vacuum issue or some type of a control issue. So basically what I did with that is when the truck was running, you'd put it down on the floor or the defrost and make sure that the air is blowing out up on your defrost or blowing out down on the floor, and then you can change it to the dash vents, make sure it's blowing out of the dash vents, that type of a thing. No issues with that. Everything seems to be changing just fine. And the third control is your thermostat control right here. And on this truck, Chrysler used a blend door. What it does is when you turn this knob right here, there is a door down below. It's down here. But what it does is it turns the door basically between hot and cold. You have your evaporator for your air conditioning system, and then you have your heater core for your heating system, and there's a door that regulates the airflow between those two, and that's what this does. So what I did was I checked that with it all the way hot. It wasn't blowing super hot, but then if you turn it to cold, the air would get a lot colder. So basically what that's telling me is that the blend door is working. Whether it's working 100% is yet to be determined. I know that it's partially working, and we'll do some further investigating on that in a little bit. Okay, so that pretty much sums up the controls in the cab, and we've basically eliminated that. Let's go check out some stuff in the engine bay right by the heater core. All right, so we're out in the engine bay, and you got coolant running through your engine to keep it cool. So it goes between the radiator and the engine, and you have your thermostat in here that opens and closes at a certain temperature to regulate the flow of coolant between the engine and the radiator. The way the heater works is basically inside the cab is you have basically a mini radiator that the coolant flows through, and when it goes in there, you got a fan that blows air through that heater core, that little radiator or the heater core, and when it blows the air through that, it heats the air up and comes out your vents. That is right back here, I mean, that's what these hoses go to. So basically, the engine gets hot, and the coolant, the hot coolant, comes out of this right here and goes back. You can't really see it, it just goes through the firewall, and then it comes through another hose. You know what? This isn't quite a factory setup on this truck. Let's go look at another truck that's more factory looking, and then we'll come back to this one. Okay, this is more of a factory looking setup on this truck. This is a 98.5. The hot coolant comes out of this, goes through this tube, and goes back into the firewall, back there, into the heater core inside the cab, and then it comes back out through this one, goes down this tube right here, and actually goes back into this neck right here, right before the water pump. You got your water pump right here. So that's basically how the heating system works for the heater core. Two things to note: it bypasses, it doesn't go through the thermostat. So this is the thermostat right here. That opens and closes to regulate the coolant between the engine and the radiator. It doesn't go through that, so it's got hot all the time. If it was going through somewhere over here and it closed off, you could lose your heater from when it's open or closed. And one other thing too, this fitting right here is actually a flow control fitting. If you were to take this fitting out and look through it, the hole in it is a lot smaller than a normal fitting would look of that size. It slows the way how fast the coolant will flow through the heater core inside the cab. Helps make the heater work better, but also if it was flowing super quick all the time, make the engine take a little bit longer to warm up by doing that. So just on a side note, that fitting right there is a flow control fitting. So if you're ever modifying a cooling system and you want to change that fitting to something, you need to take note and look at that. So let's go back. Okay, back at the 01 silver truck. The only thing I've done is, because I've got this compound turbo set up on this truck, is the return normally would come over here, and there was that hard line that ran along and dropped down to right below the water pump. All I've basically done is taken it and put a soft hose all the way right here where it comes out. It just runs along on the other side of the turbos and goes back down back into the engine right before the water pump. Why this is important, what we're going to do with this is we're going to test the temperature on these two hoses going into the heater core and then coming back out of the heater core, what the temperature is, if there's a difference. So the one obviously coming from the engine going into the heater core should be real hot. It should be the same temperature as the engine. And coming back out, it should be about the same. There shouldn't be much drop. So we'll test the temperature between the two and see if there's a difference. And what that's going to tell us is if the heater core's plugged. If the heater core's plugged and the coolant isn't passing through it, then that's probably our issue. And what we're going to do is, you can actually just grab a hold of that, and it's really hot. I mean, I can hold it for a little bit, but it's really warm. And if I grab the other side, and I've got the truck shut off right now. If I grab the other side's pretty warm too. According to the thermostat in my hand, they feel about the same. But what we're going to do to be sure, we're going to start the truck back up, make sure it's still at operating temperature, and then we're going to use a laser temperature to test the temperature of those hoses, is what we're going to do. I know some guys that don't like to use this kind of setup. They want to actually tape a temperature sensor on there for like a fluke meter or something. They want to actually tape it to the hose to get a better reading. But this has always worked for me, so that's what we're going to do. So let's start it up and test the temperature. All right, we took the temperature on the inlet and outlet of the heater core coming from the engine and then returning back to the engine. And from what we're reading on that temp gauge, it's looking like we got about an 8-degree drop from where it goes into the heater core and where it comes out. I don't know if it's necessarily enough to make a difference. We're going to do a reverse flush on the heater core anyways and see what that does. I kind of have a sneaky suspicion that that might be the case anyways, because this truck sat for a few years when it wasn't running and it didn't have coolant in it. It was missing the radiator, the coolant was drained. Obviously there would have been a little bit of coolant up there inside the heater core, and I wonder if there's just some buildup or corrosion. And I mean, regardless, even if it wasn't from in there, that's gonna be probably one of the smallest spots where stuff's gonna get caught up and backed up anyway. So we'll try to do a reverse flush. Basically what you can do is you unhook the heater lines going in and coming out, and we've got clamps that we can clamp. I'll show you when we get all the parts. And then what you do is you can basically just hook a hose, your garden hose or hose from your house, and put it to the return side, and then the inlets, the side that normally goes in, you just hook a hose and put it back into a bucket. So basically you're just pushing water, just tap water through the backwards and try to flush out some of that buildup or stuff that might be plugging it up. So let's get to it. All right, here's the plan. We got all the parts together to do this reverse flush on this heater core. Let me show you what we got going on here. We have a hose right here that actually made out of a roll of heater hose, and it's just got these ends that I picked up at Lowe's or Home Depot. Put these fittings on it, and basically what we're going to do is we're just going to pull off one of these ends. The other end we're just going to stick in to the hose in the faucet in the sink, and then this will just hook right to the heater core, the return side that we undo. We've got this side, this piece of heater hose that we're going to hook to the other side of the heater core and drop it down into a bucket to catch all the coolant so that we're not spraying used coolant everywhere. We'll dispose of that properly. And then just a couple of tools. We've got some clamps to clamp these on, some pliers to take off the old clamps because they're the Chrysler spring style clamps that are still on there. And then I've got these. They can pinch, and then they hold on and pinch the heater line. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 2 of those on the heater lines, go into the heater core so we don't lose all of our coolant in the truck or lose a bunch of it while we unhook the heater core. You know, and they got rounded edges and stuff, so they're not like using a set of vice grips, you know, to pinch it, and it doesn't really damage the hose. So let's get started on that. One quick safety tip too, before you do this, make sure that the cooling system is either cooled down, but also make sure that there's no pressure in the cooling system, either by bleeding it off with the, if you have a radiator cap that you can bleed it off, or throwing a rag and removing the radiator cap. Make sure there's no pressure in the system before you start taking that kind of stuff apart, so you don't get sprayed with hot coolant. But yeah, let's tear into it. All right, we got it all hooked up. We've got the inlet from the sink, from the garage sink, going into back in there into the return. So we're going to feed into that, and then the return, we're going to have this drain. It's going to come down into this bucket. I actually just zip tied this rag, this white rag on the end of it. I'm going to try to catch some of the, see if it'll catch any sediments. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but I wanted to see what kind of stuff, if any stuff, comes out of there. I'm hoping that that rag will still let the fluid through and just catch the sediments, and we'll be able to see it, but let's see what happens. Looks like we got about all the coolant coming out. Now it looks like just fresh water. God, you can see some stuff floating around in there. It looks like. We're gonna let this run for a little bit. We got the hot water cranked. And we'll just we'll let this run till about it fills the bucket. Man, that's some nasty stuff coming out of there. But now that we've got all the coolant and stuff out of there, I might actually just let it run, not into the bucket, but just let it keep running for another few minutes and just see with the hot water and just see what other kind of stuff, make sure we got it all out of there and see if that helps. We'll let it run for a little bit longer and then we'll put it back together and see if it helps at all. Alright, got her all buttoned up, put back together. Unhooked the flush lines, hooked the regular lines back up. On a side note, I did end up trimming both of those heater hoses a little bit shorter. They both kind of tore when I was trying to take them off the heater core. The one side, this other hose, not that big of a deal because there's plenty. But this side, where it's this molded hose, luckily there was enough to be able to get it back on and get the clamp back on. But I'm probably going to I'm gonna order a new one of these. It's not brittle, but it tore pretty easy when I tried to get the hook pick up underneath it to get it off of there. So now we're gonna fire it up, let it warm up a little bit, top off the coolant, make sure we got enough in there. Probably gonna shovel some snow and then take it for a burn and see how it does. Oh, hello. We got the truck all back together. It's been warming up for a second. We're gonna take it for a drive and see how the heater goes. It's already blowing warmer. We're at not quite up to operating temperature. But we are blowing at almost 110 out of the vents. So it's already looking good. Took a drive around the block and yeah, and it's about up to operating temperature and we're blowing out 120 degrees out of the vents, so that's a huge improvement from between 70 and 80, and I think maybe with a longer drive it'd probably be even more than that, so I'm gonna count that as a win. Hey, I just wanted to show you guys one last thing in troubleshooting a heating or cooling system in a vehicle like this. With that blend door, there is a pretty common problem between the motor and the blend door itself. There's a little plastic cup link that hooks the motor to the blend door. And it's not just on Dodge trucks, it's on a lot of other Chrysler vehicles. What happens is that little spacer will break and it won't turn the blend door, it won't turn it all the way. It doesn't seem like that was the issue with this, but I'm just gonna show you right up under here. So this is the motor for the blend door. Hold on, I'm gonna take the... There we go. Had to take the little tripod off, but right up in here, you can see this motor is what turns the blend door up inside this box. And it's kind of hard to see, but there's right here, it's covered in dust, but there's a spacer up top. There's a shaft that comes out of this motor, and then there's a spacer up top. I'm gonna see if I can show you how this turns, but that spacer will break. Okay, so I am going to turn. I don't know if you can see that or not, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn. It's all the way at hot right now. I'm going to turn it to cold, and you can see that door turn. See right there, you can see that shaft. Turning right there. And that's what turns the blend door. Just wanted to show you that. If you liked this video, thought it was helpful, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe down below if you want to see more stuff going on like this, and go build something cool. Just wanted to get a little update. Driving to work this morning. It's like 30 degrees outside.